Hello everyone and welcome to Grandstand Sports Data. In today's video, we will be continuing our 13 chapter series on the art of sports betting. We will be educating you on what we call the 13 pillars for turning you from a square to a sharp with similar principles to the book The Art of War. We will be providing action steps through each of the chapters so you can improve your betting approach and get you betting more responsibly. We will also add our final thoughts from the 17 years of experience that we have betting on sports. So let's get right into it. So you've already done the prep work, you understand value, you know how to shop for the best odds, and you've built a solid bankroll strategy. But now the real battlefield starts to open up. You're looking at a full slate of games, dozens of bets calling your name, and temptation on every single line. So what do? You don't go to war with the whole board. Just like a general doesn't attack every enemy on the map, a sharp bettor doesn't bet on every game. You conserve your energy, you focus on the battles you can win, and then you strike only where you hold the edge. This is where the 9-step bet selection process comes in. It's going to help you cut through the noise, eliminate minus EV edges, and then also make disciplined, efficient winning decisions. So if you've ever stared at a Saturday board or even an NFL Sunday overwhelmed by choice, this is the process that's going to give you clarity. Let's break it down step by step and start betting like a pro. Okay, so before we dive deep into the 9-step bet selection process, it's going to be important to recognize one key truth here. And that's your process should be tailored to match both your handicap and style and the market you're betting in. So let's start with the handicap and style. There are three main types. We've talked about this throughout the series. You have your technical handicapping. This is model based, stats driven, using simulations, advanced statistics, all that good stuff to project your outcomes. You're trying to project your outcomes. Next would be fundamental handicapping. Talked about these at length as well. You're focusing on matchups, motivation, coaching tendencies, and then most importantly, probably injuries and all the qualitative aspects of a game or event, whatever you are handicapping. Finally, will be hybrid. This we're more introducing this, but it's because it's real important here. Hybrid doesn't just mean you do both fundamental and technical analysis. Honestly, you should already be doing both. But the truth behind this hybrid better is that it knows how to blend technical and fundamental factors into a unified forecast. You have seen this here at Grandstand Sports Data. If you are subscribed to us, you saw our coaching model when it came to the NFL and how we built it. We would say that that is a fundamental factor that we turned into statistics. So we blended the two. That would be the hybrid. Now, you're not just looking at stats and situations separately in that certain situation, you're weaving them together into a single cohesive prediction. So for market type, we've already told you this. There are big and small markets, and we will dive deeper into those in the next slide. Okay, so let's talk about the markets now. We have big markets, which are going to be the sports with a ton of action. So, sharp money that moves the lines. You're looking at NFL, NBA, Major League Baseball. And then you have on the other side the small markets, which are the lower volume betting sports. They don't spend as much time sharpening the lines. This is going to be WNBA, college basketball, especially if you're talking about mid majors. Also some NHL, and I would say all the way down at the bottom, some of your props, derivatives, and futures. Now, why does this matter? Because in big markets, you often need to factor in market analysis, like line movement, steam, and public money. And this is just to stay ahead. But in small markets, you often can skip step 6, which is going to be in our process, market analysis. Why? Because fundamental and technical handicapping alone can be enough to uncover value. So there's less sharp action, less market movement to react to. Therefore, you get a better line. So before you jump into the full process, ask yourself, what kind of handicapper am I? What type of markets am I betting? This helps you customize your bet selection process so you're only focusing your energy where it's most effective. Now let's break down the 9 steps and help you pick your spots like a pro. So let's start with step number 1. This is going to be your initial handicap. So before we look ahead to the next slate of games, you need to take a step back and make sure that your foundation is up to date. So whether you're a daily bettor or even betting weekly, your decisions are only as good as the information that you're working with. You have to remember that. So the first thing you should do is you want to update your record keeper. And that's not just about wins and losses, even though that is important. You want to get all your scores, you want to, get everything up to date. Then next, you're going to want to move on to some of these key actions. Some of them are going to be, your technical stats. You want to update those. You want to update your model, even your power ratings. If you're more of a fundamental guy, you still will have to take care of some of those technical areas, but you'll be looking at injuries, coaching adjustments, and motivational angles. You're going to want to take a note of all of those as well. Usually in this step, the technical handicappers will update their models with the most current statistics. That's the most important, most current statistics. For my fundamental handicappers, they're going to adjust their power ratings based on what they just observed. So a team may have lost, but if the performance was strong given the context, they will reflect that. But usually everyone will do the third bullet, which is identify new trends, patterns, and standout performances. You're going to also want to take notes of those. Now we're going to get into the final bullet, which bleeds into step 2. It's going to be begin scanning the upcoming slate. So while keeping those adjustments in mind, that's why it's important to scan, the upcoming slate. You don't want to evaluate the next matchup with poor numbers. Everything needs to be up to date. Your record keeper, your models, and your fundamental stats. That's going to move us on to step number 2. And step number 2 is going to be creating an outcome or a prediction. This is the moment where you stop reacting to the market and start building your own vision on how the game's going to play out. So, what you should be asking yourself is what would be the average result of this competition if it were played 1,000 times under the same conditions? So, that's the mindset of a sharp bettor. Not trying to predict that one off fluke, but understanding the long term expectation. Now, how do we build some of these outcomes? Well, the technical handicapper may move to that statistical modeling, right? He may do those Monte Carlo simulations. You want to run about 1,000 or even more of these iterations of a game using that stat-based formula. Now, for my fundamental handicappers, you may prefer to compare power ratings and make manual adjustments. Now, moving on to the next step is going to be converting the forecast into break-even percentages. So once you've predicted a result, you need to ask yourself, at what odds would this bet break even? For spread or total bettors, this means comparing your margin of victory or total to the market's line. So if you have a margin of victory at +7 for a certain team, but the line has it at -3.5, you may have found some value there. For my money line bettors, you're going to want to calculate your forecasted win probability and then compare it to the market's probability. Now, one of the most important things here is measuring variance and confidence. For my technical handicappers, they're going to use things like standard deviation to gauge the spread of results, and then they're going to use z-score to measure how well their model performs in similar scenarios. For my fundamental handicappers, they can just use a scale from 1 to 5 on how they feel on each of these. So variance is obviously, this is a matchup that doesn't have many different outcomes. Or is it a situation where there's a dozen different ways that this game could end? That's variance. For confidence, it's simple. How confident are you in your forecasted result? And now don't worry about, the z-score and standard deviation. We're going to go more, dive deeper into that into chapter 10, which is record keeping, because it's a really good indicator of what we just talked about, variance and confidence. So, what's the main premise here? It's you're not building a forecast and turning it into a break-even percentage. You're not betting with an edge. You're just going to be guessing. So you want to forecast first, then test the forecast, and that's how real bettors operate. So let's keep going to step 3, where we're going to start eliminating some of this noise. Okay, so now that we got our forecast, you're going to want to introduce those predictions to the market and start making some real decisions. This is where we're going to filter the board, cut games that don't actually make the cut, and then shortlisting games that show some true value. So let's break it down into 2 steps. Obviously, the step three, which is going to be eliminating games. This is going to be your first line of defense. Just because you created a forecast doesn't mean that every game is worth betting. You need to compare your implied odds or predicted margin to the market's odds. There's three ways that you eliminate games: when you have no edge or you have minus EV. So why sit there and risk, any of your bankroll on a game like that? You just wouldn't. Next, just like we touched on when it came to the measurements of variance and confidence, you want to eliminate games with high variance in your forecast. So if your expected outcome is all over the place, you just can't trust that prediction, which is going to lead into low confidence. Maybe the data is shaky or the matchup is unpredictable. If you're unsure, you're going to walk away. So this is not the time to fall in love with the team or narrative if the edge isn't necessarily there. You always want to eliminate and identify, which is going to lead us into step four: identifying games, or maybe even shortlisting them for your bets. So you're obviously looking for those plus EV opportunities, these games where your forecast clearly beats the market's number. You also want to identify a game if there's low variance. Your projection is solid and consistent. You also want to look at a bet closer if you have high confidence in your forecast based on your research or historical results. So these are the spots where you hold the edge and the sportsbook doesn't. So we've got the elimination identification checklist on the screen right now. Make sure you use it. Treat this like your pre-battle recon. Final note from us here, though, is from this point forward, step 3 and 4 should be repeated after every step, all the way until the process to when you're actually selecting your bets. You want to come back here, you want to re-eliminate weak spots, reconfirm the value. This is how sharp bettors trim that fat and only strike where the edge is real. So let's move on to step 5, where we narrow our focus even further. All right, so step 5 is going to be performing fundamental handicapping. Now that you've narrowed down your list of potential bets, it's time to dig deeper into intangibles, the stuff the models don't always catch. This is where you fine tune your forecast by analyzing what's really happening on the field, in the locker room, and even between the lines. Now, some people may say, where was the technical handicapping? I would call that step number 2 when you were running your model, you got your stats all up to date, and you wanted those Monte Carlo simulations and you compared those power ratings. That's what I would call technical handicapping. So now here is more of the intangibles. What do you analyze? You want to analyze motivational factors, rest and travel, injuries, matchups, and even coaching. A quick heads up here though, we're going to go way deeper into fundamental handicapping in chapter 8, so we're just going to touch the surface here. But for now, you just need to analyze the slate with these angles in mind and then always revisit steps 3 and 4. Ask yourself again, are these variables the reason for a big difference in my odds versus the markets? Maybe you may want to eliminate those. What about, does the variable favor my line or the book's? Well, if it favors your line, you may want to identify that as a possible bet. Either way, trim the list, refine your edge, and eliminate the noise. Let's move on to step 6, which is going to be market analysis. This is where big market bettors really separate themselves from everybody else. Okay, so now on to market analysis, which is going to be step 6. Let's be real here. Sports betting is half knowing the game and then half knowing the market. So you can be the smartest sports fan in the room, but if you don't understand how to read the market, you're just going to be donating to the book. So, on the flip side, someone who does know how to read the market can be profitable without even knowing much about the sport. But what do the best sports bettors do? They're obviously going to do both. But if you're going to master just one, I want you to start with market analysis. And the main goal for market analysis here is going to be become a contrarian bettor. If public bettors are square and they lose long term, then you obviously want to be on the opposite side. Well, how do you do that? Well, the first way is going to be, you're going to want to compare the lines. Remember, we talked about this, the 3 different types of lines: your line, consensus line, and then the sharp line. So if your forecast lines up with the sharp line and the consensus line hasn't matched it yet, that's a good opportunity to pounce on a bet. Now, moving on to the middle column, you're going to want to spot the sharp side. And a good rule of thumb on this is to look at those 65 to 35 splits. What I mean by this is maybe 65% of the bets are on one team, 35% of the bets on the other team. Well, the side that got 35% of the bets would be considered the contrarian. But don't just stop at looking at percentage of bets. Look at percentage of bets versus the money. An example would be if a team has 30% of bets, but 70% of the money, that's a sharp influence. Why? Because it means fewer people are betting big on it, and the book is reacting to that respected money, not the volume. And respected money equals sharp money. For the last column, you're going to want to monitor line movement. And here's what you want to watch. You want to look for reverse line movement. This is when the public is hammering one side, but the line moves the other way. That's sharp money pushing against the crowd. Next, you're going to want to look at steam moves. This is when the line jumps across multiple sports books simultaneously. This means a sharp group hit the market fast. Next, you're going to want to look at stale lines. This is when one book lags behind while others have moved. And then that's your opportunity to pounce before it catches up. And last, and I would say most importantly, is closing line value. If you consistently beat the closing line, you're a sharp. There's no and ifs or buts about it. If not, you may need to reassess your process. I cannot stress how important beating the closing line is. For any technical, fundamental, or even market variable, you must, and I mean must, track its closing line value. This is the number one indicator that you have a successful variable when betting on sports. And remember, if you're betting on small market sports like WNBA or props, you can skip this step and head to step 7. In small markets, fundamental and technical handicapping are enough. There's not enough sharp money or line movement to make market analysis reliable. But in big markets like NFL, NBA, college football, this step is going to be critical. This is how you make sure you're not betting like the crowd, but with the professionals. So let's keep rolling. Now that you've evaluated the market, it's time for step 7, which is going to be odds shopping. Okay, so now that we're on to odds shopping, this is where all your hard work, your forecasting, your market analysis, your discipline, it's all going to come together. It's time to get the best price. So let's be real here. Every single cent matters, every half point shifts value, and if you're betting without checking around, you're going to be handing the sportsbook some free money. Now, let's move on to the tactics to master odds shopping. Number one is have accounts at multiple sports books. So you should have already done this when you built your betting plan in chapter 1, and this gives you what we call multiple outs. Moving on to number 2 is going to be use odds comparison tools. This should also already be in your toolkit. It's the fastest way to scan multiple books and spot value on the fly. So we're going to start at number 3, which is going to be create your own artificial market, also known as squeezing the juice. We went over this in depth in chapter 4, odds shopping. The idea is to combine odds from multiple books to create your own low or no vig market. You're looking for pricing gaps where one book offers maybe minus 104 and another has plus 105. That's going to be your edge. Now moving to number 4, you're going to want to sharp for market inefficiencies. You're not just finding the best line, you're spotting discrepancies that show sportsbook might be slow to react to or behind the sharper books. This is how you uncover value the public will never notice. Moving on to number 5, you're going to want to execute the bet with the best line. So now that you've done all the work, you're going to want to pull the trigger. Place the bet at the book giving you the best number, and then track your closing line value to make sure your instincts and your process are paying off. Some of this may seem redundant because step 6 bleeds into step 7, and they work hand in hand when analyzing the market. But up next is going to be step 8, which will be sizing your bets. Let's talk about how much you should be putting on the line for each of your plays. Okay, so now on to step 8, which is going to be placing your bets. You've done everything right up until this point. You've filtered your slate, you've forecasted, you've shopped for the best line. Now comes one of the most overlooked pieces of the puzzle. How much do I bet? Well, picking the right games is only half of the battle. It's how you size your bets and manage your daily exposure. This will determine whether you're still betting in 6 months or out of the game altogether. So here's some of the keys to smart bet execution. You're going to want to stick to your bankroll strategy. So your bet sizing should reflect your approach as a bettor. If you're a volume bettor, this means lots of bets and is mostly on small edges. You're going to want to stick to 1% of your bankroll per play and expect to keep more of your bankroll in sports books since you'll have more action. If you're a sniper bettor, this means fewer bets, bigger edges, but you can go up to 3% per play, but keep more money in that high yield savings account we talked about in chapter 2, or even out of circulation to protect against those downswings. Next, you're going to want to follow the 5% and 15% rule. These are your guardrails for staying alive in the game. Never risk more than 5% of your bankroll on a single play, and then never have more than 15% of your bankroll tied up at one time. So even if your model is screaming value, don't go over these numbers. That's how good bettors go broke. Now, for the final one, your bet staking strategy. These are several staking approaches, or there are several staking approaches. You have your fixed unit, you have your percentage base, you have your confidence base. But you don't just want to feel good about a game and throw more at it. Confidence must be earned by performance, not emotion. We're going to dive much deeper into this in bet sizing and staking strategies in Chapter 9, and we're going to show you exactly how to structure your units, scale your bankroll, and make adjustments as your season progresses. The bottom line here is to stay disciplined at the betting window, and it's just as important as staying disciplined during the research. You want to stick to your system, size your bets responsibly, and then live to bet another day. So let's wrap up step number 9 with tracking and adjusting with your record keeping. So let's move on to the final step, record keeping. And look, every single bet teaches you something. That's the first thing you need to understand. Win or lose, there's a lesson behind the result. But here's the catch. If you don't track it, you're never going to learn from it. So let's talk about the 3 core goals that come with record keeping and why they matter. Number 1, you're going to want to look at your finances. You need to track your bankroll health. Are you managing money like a pro, or are you bleeding slowly without even knowing it? Next is number 2, which is going to be your performance. What's working? What's not working? You can't refine your process if you don't know your actual win rate, ROI, and what bet types are dragging you down. Number 3, and probably the most important, is the data that you collect becomes the foundation for your future plan. Over time, your results will highlight strengths, expose weaknesses, and show you where to double down and where to cut the bait moving forward. So, what should you track? The short answer is going to be everything. We have a list of things down here below, like your bet type, and market, your basics, line movement, technical, fundamental factors, but all of these need to be measured by these 3 measurements: your win loss percentage, or you can just do win percentage, your profit and loss in terms of units, and then your rate of return. So, if you ever ask yourself further down the road, is this a variable that I should track? The answer is always going to be yes. You always want to, it doesn't matter what it is, you must track everything. The more you track, the more you'll learn. And the more you learn, the sharper you will get. And just a heads up, we're going to dive even deeper into record keeping in chapter 10, where we'll show you how to set up a system that tracks your bankroll, your bets, and your edge all in one place. But for now, this is your final checkpoint when firing a bet. Let's close it out with a final recap and a takeaway. Okay, so let me give you my final thoughts with my 17 years of betting experience here. I know what some of you guys are going to be thinking is, wow, we're going to have a 9-step situation on how to pick a sports bet. This feels like a lot. It almost feels like I'm drinking from like a fire hose. And you're not necessarily wrong. It is a lot, but only at first. I would say that anything worth doing is going to take time in the beginning. It's almost like your first day at work, right? You followed someone around, you probably asked 1,000 questions, you probably did something wrong a few times, but now you feel like you can almost go there and do it without even thinking. This process is basically no different. You need to give it time. You're probably going to want to stick to one sport at first and one bet type and master that. And my next bit of advice would be don't let it take over your life neither. Like your family, your relationships, your peace of mind, those things are going to come first. Sports betting should never, become the thing that robs you of people or the priorities that matter most in your life. The best way to do this was when earlier in my sports betting career, I felt like I was taking up too much time handicapping. And what I did, and which has been a godsend for me in my handicapping process and throughout this whole process of the bet selections, is automating everything. I have tried to automate as much as I can, and that has taken my it's done more than cut it. It must have cut about 70% of the time out of all that legwork. Now basically most of my time, if I'm in a big market, is going to be market analysis, or if I'm in a small market, I really can almost pick off a bet or spot an inefficiency in literally 15 minutes after running through my process. That's how easier it's going to become for you as well. You just need to remember, try to automate everything. Pick one sport, pick one bet type, and master that. Once you can get through one sport, one bet type, automating everything, then you can start picking up more sports, maybe more bet types. The list goes on and on. But you need to remember, don't risk your life, your personal life for sports betting. We're just trying to do this for fun at first, and if you make a little bit of money on it, that's great. Now, what I will say, if you like this video or you got something out of it, please hit the like button. Also, drop a comment down below on what you think about the bet selection process. Also, make sure to subscribe to Grandstand Sports Data for more content like this that's going to give you the real edge. Also, we want to say thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you in the next chapter.